So, darlings, do you believe that you were created to impact the world? Do you believe that you can impact the world? Maybe you won't feed the 5,000, but you can do your part. We can all do our part to impact humanity. And on this season of the Wake Up and Show Up podcast, we are weaving together stories and interviews of people that are doing their part. People just like you that are making an impact, that are showing the good in the world. Real people, real stories, making a real impact. Hello, darlings, and welcome to Wake Up and Show Up with Portia Scott. This is your podcast recap. I'm super duper excited to be on today and just hear from our house guest today, hear from you guys. You know how we do it here on Wake Up and Show Up. I want to know, what are you grateful for? Hello, mommy. Thank you so much for joining, darling. So if you are on, if you are here, let us know in the comments what you are grateful for. We are so happy to see everyone coming on. I'm super excited. Jasmine, hello, darling. How are you? Val, hello, darling. How are you? So you guys, I'm super excited to be on here. If you listen to the podcast today, you know that it was just an espresso shot. So we did a quick podcast because, as you guys know, listen, over here, we are a maybe 3-person show. And so a 3-person ran show. So me, Daryl, D. Mitch, the producer, and Rosetta. And so we had some technical difficulties with editing the podcast, but we are getting it together. We're going to release that episode for tomorrow. And so we are super duper excited to see you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining. Hello, hello, hello. So you guys, I want to know in the comments, what are you grateful for? I know mommy says she's grateful for her family. I want to know, what are you guys grateful for today before we get into the live? So one of the things that I am grateful for is this week, one of my good girlfriends came in from DC, and I have been with her from Monday until tomorrow when she leaves, but we have had such an amazing time. And it just is a reminder about community and how important it is to have community. And as we're talking a little bit about community, that is one of the things that my house guest today is creating. Jasmine says, I am grateful for personal growth. I love it. I love it. I love it. Mommy says family. So you guys, let us know in the comments, what are you grateful for? So before we get started, I do want to put this up and just let you know that during this interview with our very special guest, we will discuss infant loss. And so I want to make sure that I put up that trigger warning. So, and let you know what we're going to be discussing, what she does to impact the lives of families, the work that she's doing and trying to get legislation and things done. But that is our trigger warning, is that we will talk about infant loss during this particular episode. So I am so glad that you guys are here. And it's so funny. So she and I did this interview, I think several months ago. And I had the opportunity to, I think I found her on Instagram, or I found her on Facebook. And I remember looking at her story and reading her story. But I think behind that story was just her mission and her purpose to help families to navigate infant loss, and how she's on a mission to make sure that families, their pain has a purpose, and what she's doing to connect providers in the community and give out information to provide care and to provide support. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our house guest for today. We are going to take your questions. We're going to talk a little bit about the episode. It's not out, so at least you get a sneak peek at to what you're going to hear when the episode drops, so that you know. So that if you all can please help me welcome Xaviera. Zay is what we call her, Bell, and she is, in fact, the founder of Zeal of Zander. Zay, thank you so much for coming on.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Listen, listen, I already told you I'm real comfortable today. I'm looking real comfortable.
Zay, we love it. We love it. Come as you are, girl. Come as you are. I am so excited to have you. Thank you, one, for doing the recap. I think what people don't understand is you spend a whole hour, almost 2 hours during the interview, and then for you to come back for like another 20, 30 minutes. I am so grateful. So thank you so much.
Anytime. Anytime.
So, Zay, I want to kind of jump right in and just talk a little bit about the organization, about Zeal of Xander. Give us and just give the community an overview of the purpose and your mission for creating that organization.
So, about 90 days after my son passed away, he passed away April. He was born and passed away April 25th, and his nonprofit was established July 25th. And so I knew that I had to do something, right? Because I knew that if I did nothing, I was not going to make it. That was just what it was. I was not going to live through this if I did not do something. So I started a nonprofit because initially in the beginning, I wanted to help every mom that had lost babies. And that had experienced what I experienced in the hospital, the experience of going through, going in and thinking that you're just going to have an anatomy scan to, oh, you're already in labor, so now you have to have this baby, and he's not gonna make it. So, with given that news,
Mm-hmm.
I knew that one is unfair for moms to have to go through a couple of things. One, the harsh delivery
Mm-hmm.
of news like that. That's number one. Number two is I think that I wanted somebody to be on the same page with me. Like I wanted somebody to at least say, you know what, we're going to try.
Right, right.
We're just going to try. And I did not have that.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted there to be something implemented in the system
Mm-hmm.
where training touched every single person, right? That meant the doctors and the nurses. That means the janitorial staff. That means the parking coordinators. I remember walking outside of the parking lot, and the lady asked me. I had the keepsake box, and she
Mm-hmm.
asked, "Can I have some of your cake?" And I was thinking, no, no, you can't. If I had cake in here, you still can have it, but it's not
Right,
cake.
right.
So Zillow Xander, what it has evolved to be is it has evolved to one, empower people to know that this is a new way of life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there is nothing that you can do in this life that will ever prepare you for losing a child. Never. um when you think of losing a child, if you think of your worst nightmare, it's 10 times worse than that because it continues on every single day, every single day, every single day. It's something it's a cycle that you do not wake up out of, right?
Right.
So you just have to implement something in your life so that you are able to survive on a consistent basis. So it's a new way of life, and you have the opportunity every single day to either allow for the trauma of your experience to be your platform or to
Right.
be your prison.
Zay, I in the interview, you say this very thing where you say, I was kind of sitting there and I had to do something in
Mhm.
order to save me.
Yeah.
Like I had to do something in order to save you. And so oftentimes our life's experiences are the reason why we create different things, while we want to make an impact in a certain area.
Mhm.
Um, And so when you were thinking about how can I save somebody else, like how do you have the strength 9 months after?
Hmm. Well, I think that I remember when, and I shared this with you too. I remember when I was standing outside of the funeral home with my mom and my dad and my best friend and Zander's dad. And so I remember just standing there weeping, and my mom um she took her hands like this and she put them on my face, and she just squeezed my face. And she said that there is nothing harder for a mother than to know that their child is hurting, and there is nothing that you can do to help them, period. And she said, I have seen you down before. And the one thing that I know that you're good for is a comeback. And I cannot wait to see who you are and who you become after this. So what I knew was is that my mother gave me permission to look after this, right? Because
Wow.
ultimately what I knew was is that my life was going to end with my where my son was.
Mhm.
That was just it. I knew that. Um, and so I had an obligation. And I remember when I was sitting in my hospital bed, I was weeping and I was crying, and God and I had this back and forth. And I told him, I am not going to hurt this bad for no reason.
Right.
So you have to show me something. Like after this, it has to be something, and it is your responsibility
Hmm.
show me something. I already gave you the sacrifice. So the sacrifice is what it is. So show me what I need to do after this. And when I walked into that parking garage and that lady asked me for some cake, I was like, okay,
That's it.
that's it. Okay.
Wow.
Um, so I think that the strength in helping others was I know that when I go to my mom's house,
Hmm.
Xander's picture is there. I know that when I go to my son's grave, that his grandmother has night lights and has every holiday she has something out there. But I also know that there are women that do not have that,
Right.
and that has to be the most horrendous journey is a journey that you have to take by yourself and
Yeah.
hurt. So you have to bear pain and isolation simultaneously, and that's unfair for anybody to have to do that.
Right. That's so true. I want to talk a little bit about your, because I get to listen back to everything that we talk about. And there is a equation that you have about maternal and infant loss. And I think that we don't, if you've never been through it,
Mm-hmm.
you've had a success, you've had a baby and you got to go home and you never think about that percentage. You never think about how many women. What is that? Tell us that equation.
So, black women, this is specific to black women. So, black women are basically two times more likely
Mm.
to lose their children, right? And then we're also three times more likely to lose our lives. And so what that equates out to be is that we are one in four. But
Mhm.
when you even look at those statistics, right? If black women and black children are two and three times more likely, and you know that if you have four women in the room, one of them
That's
is
good.
going to have lost a child. If you put a group of women in a room
Mhm.
and you say one, two, three, four, somebody lost a child, somebody lost a child, and you bring all of those women to the front, it means about 50% of those women are gonna be black.
Wow.
Statistically.
Right.
Um, and that looks crazy when it comes to the fact that we are the minority in this country.
Mhm. But we're losing babies and lives at such an alarming rate.
Yes.
Um, So, I think when we talked about it and you kind of tell the story and you'll tell the story in the podcast, they can hear the full story. But I want to talk a little bit about when we go in and really fighting for our health, because you kind of tell the story of how um they put you back they put his due date back. So talk a little bit about them putting his due date back.
Okay. So in North Carolina is one of the states
Mhm.
that says they do not intervene. So similarly, North Carolina and New York, right? Um, they're one of the states that says, hey, if your child is not at 23 weeks gestation, we don't intervene, right?
Okay.
So when I went to my anatomy scan,
Mhm.
they are a little bit before the week before my anatomy scan, they said, he's measuring a little small.
Mhm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to change his due date from August the 20th to August the 30th. In my head, I'm like, okay, well, that's fine because he's going to come when he wants.
Right.
Like,
So a week, because you
okay,
figure 2 weeks before,
yeah.
2 weeks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind
He's
of
gonna- I was like, okay. Um, but I did not take into consideration that, and if you guys hear a pet, it is my unruly, my unruly Pomeranian. I'm just giving you guys a warning now. But I did not take into consideration that them changing his due date like that would
Mhm.
cost him his life. Um, when they when I went in, they said that, hey, you're at 21-6. You're 21 weeks, 6 days.
Mhm.
We cannot intervene. So what we're gonna have to do is the trauma of the birth may just kill him. However, when Zander came out, he was almost a foot long, and they looked, and one of the nurse that delivered him was like, "He's bigger than we anticipated. Do you want us to call the NICU?" And they were like, "No," because they had already established, he's
That we're
21.
not going to intervene.
Yeah,
But had you kept that date, that would have made him right at about 22 or almost 23.
23 weeks.
So
Yeah.
that one decision,
hmm That one decision to change his due date on paper cost him his life.
because
And the saddest thing about it is that when we go, I'm a believer, or I used to be a believer of when I go to someone else's place of business, I don't tell them how to do their job
right, right,
because you're an expert in the area. There's no way that I could go in Target and tell them how to do their job. You listen, you work at Target, girl. You went through the training, you know what to
right.
do.
You know exactly what to do.
Yeah, you know exactly what to do. But when, as Black women, when we go into these doctors, you hire your doctor, you fire your doctor. And what I learned now is that you advocate for every single thing in your appointments, due dates, birthing plans, medications. You advocate for everything,
Mhm.
because ultimately, and we definitely have to just be realistic about it,
Right.
is that there is some implicit bias already when you step into the building.
Mhm. Right. Absolutely. We talk about it, and it doesn't matter. Like sometimes you may feel like, oh, well, it's because, well, I have a better insurance, so I'm going to get treated better, or I'm self-pay and I can pay all of this. But I think, like you said, that implicit bias. And so I know we're going to talk a little bit about the providers that are in your book.
Yeah.
Do you all talk about that, about changing what that looks like when we walk into a hospital, when we're walking into a doctor's office, when was there something that somebody else would have got better care because of the color of their skin, and looking at that, at
hmm
those biases?
Yeah. And ultimately, it's true. Maybe if I was white when I went into the doctor, they wouldn't have changed my due date. Um, that simply, I remember someone, one of the doctors telling me, "Oh, don't worry about taking prenatals, just take a Flintstone vitamin." And I'm thinking, I have never heard, I have never heard of that. I'm just going to continue to take my prenatals. A Flintstone vitamin is not going to be okay for me. I'm just going to take the prenatal. I think also too is that we get so afraid of advocating for
So
ourselves Because we don't want to
No.
be viewed as aggressive. Like we don't want to be viewed as the angry black woman. We don't want to be viewed as difficult. We don't want to be viewed as being someone that's unrealistic and that cannot be assisted. So we don't want to be viewed as that. But when you look at the scales, there's no balance. You will never not be that. Right? When you are advocating for yourself, you will never not be difficult. You will never not be angry.
Right.
You will never not be aggressive. So the scales will never be balanced. And that's the one thing that I had to remember, because I always say this, and whoever is watching, if it's nothing that you learn from this, you remember this. At the end of the day, you are the person that goes to sleep with you at night. I had to be able to wake up in the morning and face myself. And in order for me to do that, I needed to rest well, knowing that anything that I could have done for my son, I did it.
You say something at the very beginning of the episode that says, Zander taught you so much. You were 37 at the time. In that time that he was here, than you had learned in 37 years. And you often get asked, would you do it again? And what is your response?
In a second. Knowing that I would lose him. Knowing that I would be broken. Knowing that it will still hurt years later. In a second, just so that I'll be able to meet him, just so that I would be able to walk this journey out, knowing that Zander, it's so interesting that it was a lady that I reached out to, and I said, hey, this is Zane. I wanted to follow up with you. And she was like, I'm so sorry, where did we meet? And I said, I'm Zander's mom. And she said, oh, okay, yeah, I know you. Right. So, and that's in LA. I went into a bookstore in Long Beach, and I was sharing with the bookstore owner, and she said, is your story on the internet? And I said, yeah, we have a website. She said, I know your story. So, and this is the interesting thing about it. She had been battling with losing her son for 20 or 30 years, and she was still so very broken. And so even being, I would say, in a early stage of the grief process, right? And looking at somebody that has been hurting for 30 years, they still look at me and say, you know what? This can make or break me. I just chose for it to make me.
Right.
And so with hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, I would do it, knowing that at the end, I would have to release him.
When you say that, and I get it. I get it. One of the things that I definitely want people to listen to the podcast, because one, if you've experienced it, if you know someone if this is a cause that's very close to your heart, I think it's important to listen and see how people can partner with you. And we'll talk a little bit about that, Zay. But I think when they hear your story and you talk about your mom, and how a bed sheet, you guys, you got to hear the story, but essentially a bed sheet allowed her to go full-term pregnancy.
Yeah. With me. She lost 5 children before me. And, one of the things that we talk about as one of the providers, we talk about the superwoman complex that we have as African-American women, period. We want to save, we don't secure our oxygen first, ever. Right? I'm on planes all the time. I'm flying from one place to the next, and all the time, 100% of the time, this never changes. They always say, if we are in a emergency state, and we begin to lose cabin pressure, make sure that you secure your oxygen first. 100%, I know that the women on the plane will forget about that,
and will
they
help
will be putting it on their children. right? They'll start
Mhm.
putting masks on their children without taking care of themselves first. And that's what happens in the grief space too.
Right.
We want to save everybody else. We want to be there. We want to encourage other people. And then we don't take a healthy dose of our own medicine.
Mhm.
And so my mother is that woman. My
Mhm.
mother is the woman that's going to at her mom's funeral is going to pick up
Make
the
sure.
plate and
Mhm.
take the trash and do those things in the midst of her own hurt. And I think that she had to bury that for so many years that she
Mhm.
had forgotten, like, hey, I lost five children, so I know how this feels and how it
Mhm.
hurts. But it took one country Alabamian to say, hey, let you have a gap in your pelvis. Let me just wrap this bed sheet around your leg, pop it, and take this calcium. Come back in 6 weeks pregnant, and she did.
And she was pregnant with you.
She was pregnant with me.
Yeah, I that story, I love it. And that's, that's in the podcast. So, Zay, you have been out here just doing the work.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your new project and what you are doing. I love it. You sent us this the morning after. Let's talk a little bit about the morning after.
So the morning after has been a very interesting work, and it has given when I started the whole grieving process. I was looking for anything. Like, I was looking for things to read. I was looking for other stories. I was just looking for something that was, similar to, what I was experiencing, what I was going through. And they had given me a book. It had some feet on there, some infant feet, some little white infant feet, with the mother's hands around it. And I was thrown off by the picture, because I was like, this doesn't look like me, right? And so when I started to look at other stuff, I could not find anything for Black women. And being a entrepreneurship coach, the one thing that I always tell my clients is your product is the solution to the problem. And so the solution to the problem was there's no literature that will assist Black women through the grief process when they have lost their children. Um, the solution is do the book, right? Just do the book.
Right. Right.
So I reached out to tons of women in different stages of
Mhm.
grief. And so the book will be in two parts. One part will be the mothers that have lost children, explaining and kind of talking about what they have gone through in the grief process. The other is practitioners. And so the practitioners are talking about basically procedures. They're talking about what we can do to advocate for ourselves. Why is it important to have a doula? What's the benefit of a midwife? We also have a Black therapist, because the one thing that I knew was that I'm from the Bible Belt. I'm an Alabamian. So the one thing that I was always told was, you just need to pray about it.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm not prepared to face God at this point.
Right. Right.
I'm not equipped for it. And so I had to identify what part of me was was angry with God, right? So
Right.
I had to figure out if my ego was mad at him. I had to figure out if my spirit was mad at him, and I had to figure out if my mind was mad at
Out of
him,
him.
right? So I
Mhm.
had to identify what that was, and I would not have been able to identify that if I had not been through therapy.
Right.
So we do have a Black therapist in there. So we have about 20 practitioners, and we have a total of about 40, 45 women that's in the book project.
I love
It'll
that.
be out in April.
Yes, so it's releasing in April. So
April.
because we are now in November, we want to make sure that people stay in touch with you so
Yes.
that we know when it goes live. So Zay, how can we stay in touch with you? How can we learn more outside of the episode? Because you guys can go listen to the episode as it is released tomorrow. But how can we stay in touch with you, Zay?
So you can definitely email me. It's Z as in zebra, AY at Zeal of Zander, and that's ZealofXander.org. You can also go to zealofzander.org. And his website is there. If you want to see pictures of Zander, you can go and see pictures of Zander. You can also go and read his full story. We are doing a lot of things next year. Specifically, one of them is we will prepare about 150 care boxes. And so those care boxes will be able to be purchased so that we can continue with scholarships for women, specifically when it comes to burial. What we do know is one of the things that we faced was a lot of women who cannot afford a funeral home to go and get to claim the remains of their children. They lose their kids in the hospital. So the hospitals do a mass cremation because they do not release your children to you. They only release the children to a funeral home, which is going to cost several $100s. So we just don't believe that it's appropriate for women and families to lose their children for a few $100s. And so that is what the care packages will be able to assist with, helping bring babies home to their parents. So those are the two ways that you can definitely reach out to us. We are also on Facebook, Zeal of Zander, and listen, I'm not real dedicated to Instagram, but I promise you I'm gonna get better. But we are, Zander does have a Instagram page on Zeal of Zander on Instagram.
I love that. I love it. So it is zealofxander.org, and they can get in touch with you at Zay at zealofxander.org. She is also at I Am Zay Bale
Yes.
on Facebook. And so, Zay, thank you so much for one, taking the time for the podcast. And I cannot wait until that is released. And then, this time today, just to share with us. And so a couple people had comments as you were talking. I just didn't want to stop because the information is just so good and so needed. Jasmine said, that's beautiful. My mom says, oh no. And that is in relation to the fact that they don't give your baby to you. So I think there's just so much that we learned, and being able to partner with you and get that book when it comes out, just so that we can equip ourselves just as a community and know what's going on. How can we help? And if we can help one family, just one family, that is huge. So Zay, thank you so very much for
You're
being
more
on the.
than
I
welcome.
appreciate you so very much.
You're more than welcome. You are more than welcome. You did not ask me, but I'm going to say this. You did not ask me what I was grateful
Grateful
for,
for
but
it.
I'm going to say it, girl. Listen, because
You better tell me. You better tell me.
let me tell you what I'm grateful for. I am grateful that God saw fit for my story to cross your path, right? Because if it had not, then I would not have been able to meet you and to be encouraged by you, to be in front of your audience of people, specifically in front of the moms that have lost their children. To be Maxwell wants to come on the screen to be a voice of reason for someone, to also just to be that person that if you need to tell somebody, that leave you alone and allow for you to grieve the way that you want to and the way that you can, let them know that Zay said that you can do it. Okay, so I'm grateful for having that much arrogance in this grieving thing, to know that I can do it how I see fit.
I love that. I love that. And I meant to ask you that. That is so good. You could tell people who listen to the podcast, be on the
Yes.
podcast, because they know I'm going to ask that question. Zay, I thank you so very much. I know that this is going to bless so many people.
Yeah.
in so many families. Keep doing the work that you're doing. Keep doing the work that you're doing. You're a strong woman. I told you that on the podcast, is that you're just the epitome of strength for what you're doing and deciding that you are going to have some purpose out of this pain. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello, darlings. So I don't know about you, but I'm just extremely full and so grateful. So people are, Val is giving you the clap hands, Zay. Rena, that's my mom. She said, thank you, Zay. Uh, Thank you for continuing to tell y'all story. I'm grateful for how open you are. God bless you. That's my sister Chaz. Thank you so much, you guys, for just joining. One of the things that we are doing, so we have now put in place this particular night. Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to go live. We're going to talk about the episodes. As many guests as we can come on, we're going to have them share a small snippet. But one of the things we're also going to do is take your questions. So if you've listened to the podcast, if you've heard an episode, if you hear the episode prior to the live, send us a question and we'll take your questions. You can actually just text your question to 404-737-0867. And if you are not part of the community, go ahead and text 404-737-0867. Why? Because you will be able to, one, send your questions in, but you'll also get information, and we send inspiration during the week to help you thrive, to go from mission to execution, to live in your purpose, and to live intentionally. You also will be alerted whenever a podcast is live or whenever we go live. So that is our community. We are building our community. I'm super excited about everyone that joins, but every Thursday we are taking your questions. And just to even be more specific, we are taking all kind of questions. You guys, if you've listened to any of the stories on the podcast and you have questions about a guest, or you have questions about something that was said, or you have questions about whatever it is, we're taking your questions here live. You can keep them anonymous. I won't tell them who asked the questions, but make sure that you're signing up to join our text community at 404-737-0867. I'll also drop the link, because if you're on your phone, all you have to do is go to the link and you can join the community. So I thank you all so much for joining us. We're 9 minutes over, and I try not to keep your time. I try to keep it to about 30 minutes. Marlene said, thank you for such, I think, necessary information and enlightened program. I appreciate it. I will be reaching out to her. Keep up the good work, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marlene. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you guys know we end every single show and every single episode with this declaration. Waking up is automatic. Showing up is intentional. Today, I will show up. I'll see you guys next week.